Can you guys hear me okay? Is that okay? Well, I have to say that it is really hard going last because this has been a fantastic conference with amazing presentations, and so I just don't know how I'm going to follow it. But I just want to say thank you, Stella, and Jen Specht for organizing this. It's a really amazing thing that they've done. I'm also going to take just a second and shamelessly plug the Gender Exploratory Therapy Association. It was really great sitting with the therapists at lunch, and I hope everyone will check us out. We have peer consultation groups. Joe and I run a monthly clinical case conference. You don't have to be out to join. We have a public-facing directory, but you don't have to be on it. So anyway, okay, that's enough of that. Okay, I'm going to talk today about reality, and you'll see. I mean, we've all been sort of the presentations have all been really thematic. So I think you'll hear me picking up on points that others have made. But before I do, I want to just start off with something here for a second. So, the American Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck says, "What makes it unbearable is your mistaken belief that it can be cured." Which I think is such a fascinating way to put it. That if we know, and I think this actually just relates exactly to what Eliza was sharing, if we know we have to accept it, then it's bearable. But if we get into, if we have a belief that it can be cured, then we almost don't have a choice but just to chase that. So I was talking to a colleague, another therapist, and he's not in the same place as I am on this issue, and we were talking about it, and he usually doesn't push back, but he said, "But Lisa, once someone is 18, we let 18-year-olds make bad decisions. We let them go to war. We let them, get bad tattoos." We've all heard this kind of stuff. And I sort of like found the right thing to say. I said, "But the difference is when someone goes to war or has an abortion or gets a bad tattoo, we're not telling them that this is going to fix your problems." And that is what we are telling young people. And so in my work with detransitioners, I found that they all tend to really blame themselves. They say, "This is 100% my fault. I wanted it. No one could have talked me out of it." But what I want to say to the detransitioners is, we told you that this would fix your problems. The adults in the room, Stephanie's talk, the betrayal of a generation, we told you, the therapists, the doctors, we told you this will fix your problems. And I appreciate the impulse to take personal responsibility. I think ultimately that's healthy. But it's not all your fault, because we told you that your human suffering could be cured in this way, and that was never true. So, okay, so I'm going to talk about reality. The dictionary tells me that reality is the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to the idealistic or notional ideal of them. And the psychologist Robert J. Lifton, who is well known for his work with cults, has pointed out that what we call reality really has two aspects. One part refers to what is socially constructed and agreed upon in society. For example, that children are not fully capable adults until they're 18, and this kind of reality can change with norms. It's kind of socially agreed upon. But there's also immediate factual components of reality which in no way depend on theoretical constructions. And according to Lifton, we require a shared sense of reality consistent with experience and evidence for our collective functioning in a democracy. So what happens when we lose this shared sense of reality? I'm particularly interested in what effect this has on us psychologically, and my rather obvious thesis is that it does not lead us toward greater psychological health. Becoming unmoored from reality impedes our ability to function and to navigate the world in the most elemental way. The effects of cutting ourselves off from reality are both blunt and subtle, immediate and long-term. And I'm going to be addressing this today with reference to a case of a young detransitioned woman. But first, I'm going to share a mother's story. So the mother of a 13-year-old girl who suddenly declared a transgender identity followed the recommendations of professionals and the common wisdom offered in the media and among her peer group in her liberal, well-educated neighborhood. She changed her child's name and pronouns, bought the girl a binder and a new wardrobe, and began adjusting to life as the mother of a transgender boy. Though she did so with the support of friends, family, and a new community of other parents of trans-identifying kids, she mysteriously developed severe vertigo. Whereas she used to take daily walks with friends, now she found she was unable to do so. At times, she experienced a disturbing sense of disorientation. I suddenly couldn't understand how trees worked, she told me. I couldn't make sense of how they stretched toward the sky and yet their roots held them down. She described the malady as a sense of groundlessness. Her dizziness was severe enough that she now needed to be accompanied when she walked the family dog. The symptoms continued until she read Irreversible Damage by Abigail Shrier. Within a few days, after a battery of medical tests, this mother realized that there was no organic cause for her vertigo. Rather, her dizziness was a somatic, symbolic symptom that evidenced the profound disorientation she experienced as she attempted to deny reality. Now I'm going to discuss the case of a detransitioned young woman, and I'm sharing her material with her permission, and I, of course, disguised identifying details. Okay, so Lucy is the eldest of two daughters, and she was raised in an intact middle-class family. Both of her parents are working professionals. She has known that she was same-sex attracted since around the age of 14, and she currently thinks of herself as a lesbian. She began her medical transition at age 19 when she started taking testosterone. Within about a year, she had had a double mastectomy and a hysterectomy and an ovarectomy. She began to detransition at 22, and about 9 months later, she entered treatment with me. When our work began, Lucy was in great distress and planning on killing herself. A part of her, however, was struggling mightily to find a way forward. Although she was wary of engaging with a therapist, she had been open enough to the possibility to reach out to me after she read some of my writings. I suggested we meet once as a try-on for size. She was quite hesitant as we set the appointment, and I was not sure she would come, but she did. She was very thin and presented as androgynous. Her hair was cut boyishly short, and she wore a t-shirt, ripped jeans, and combat boots. Her testosterone-deepened voice was noticeable. It would have been easy to mistake her for a teen boy. Her discomfort in our first session was evident. She had difficulty maintaining eye contact and sometimes spoke haltingly. I also sensed her acute isolation. Despite her wariness to engage with me, she was desperate to talk. She had picked out a date on which she intended to suicide, determined a highly lethal plan, and begun to contemplate acquiring the means. She was ruminating about suicide, spending hours a day on a website that promoted suicide and included a community of others who were planning to kill themselves. The site included instructions on a highly lethal method and also taught people how to obtain the means to do this. The immediate focus of our work involved facilitating grieving the end of her relationship with her girlfriend. We spent many hours with her telling me the story of their relationship and reviewing the final betrayal, which had hurt her deeply. And as we did this, the pain around these events lessened ever so slightly. We also had to process the loss of her healthy body. Because she had had an ovarectomy, she is dependent on exogenous estrogen. And this daily reminder of the loss of her healthy body was extremely distressing for her. So she would ruminate about that the same way she would ruminate about suicide, the same way she had ruminated about transition when she was trans-identified. She often felt enraged at the therapist who had written her the letters for the testosterone and surgeries, and at the surgeons. I joined her in her outrage. Many detransitioners blame themselves entirely for the losses of transition, but I pointed out that she had been young and vulnerable and that the doctors and therapists had been irresponsible in how they handled her care. You'll hear, but there were these issues that just didn't even get touched or brought up or explored. She said to the surgeon, she went in for a hysterectomy, and she's sort of this little bitty thing, and I have this image. She said to the surgeon, she said, "I want my ovaries out too." And he said, "We can do that." Focusing on how she had been betrayed by the doctors and therapists helped her to feel angry rather than depressed and hopeless. The psychoanalyst Karen Marotta uses the term social deprivation, talking about extreme isolation. And Marotta points out that this profound lack of social connection reduces resiliency and the ability to tolerate distress. So Lucy felt profound desolation over the recent end of her relationship with her girlfriend. She was heartbroken and in agony. Much of our early work focused on heartbreak and loss. And socially, she was quite isolated. Her efforts to establish connections had been complicated by the fact that many in her peer group at college were hostile to detransitioners. In addition, socializing was sometimes stressful, as there were aspects of her appearance and presentation that continued to read male. People often weren't sure what to make of her. This made dating and intimate relationships especially difficult. She spent almost all her time alone in her apartment. No one knew the degree of her pain. Her parents couldn't offer much emotional support, and she had few friends. Her appointments with me became the focus of her week. During this time, Lucy became connected with other detransitioners and engaged in some advocacy. She started a vlog where she shared videos about her detransition, and this helped to give her a sense of purpose and connected her with others. We're going to talk a little bit about sexuality. Lucy began to come to terms with the fact that her transition had been motivated significantly by feelings of shame and inadequacy over being lesbian. She now claimed this identity with fervor, but she also got so in touch with the shame about it. I remember her one day using the word lesbian for the first time and just starting to sob because she just felt so ashamed. She worried that other women would not find her attractive since she no longer had breasts. Consolidating an identity as a lesbian was made more complicated by the fact that most of the other same-sex attracted women at her college were very pro-trans or identified as queer. And so Lucy tried not to be too out as a detransitioner because of this. I'm going to skip a little bit because I can see I don't have much time. Let me go on to comorbid conditions. Lucy suffered from several serious mental health issues that predated her transition. She had obsessive-compulsive disorder since her early teens that often resulted in impaired functioning. When she was 15, she had developed anorexia and she'd been in inpatient treatment several times. She had bulimia. She had binged and purged daily throughout her entire transition. In time, as we worked together, Lucy began integrating a new sense of self. She stopped participating in online detransition groups and no longer posted entries on her vlog. Her social media use changed from detransition-related content to video game content. Our work shifted away from immediate concerns over suicidality and profound distress and regret over her transition and detransition, and focused instead on her continued adaptation to young adult life. Currently, she's navigating school and social and vocational issues. She has had some success making friends and has recently begun dating. She continues to struggle with OCD and occasionally relapses with her bulimia. Okay, I want to switch now and talk about the gender affirmative approach. When Lucy sought therapy for her gender dysphoria, she was treated according to the gender affirmative model of care. The therapist affirmed that she was a boy and that she needed to transition socially and medically. So I'm going to quote Diane Ehrensaft describing what the gender affirmative model is. She says, "It's a method of therapeutic care that includes allowing children to speak for themselves about their self-experience, gender identity, and expressions, and providing support for them to evolve into their authentic gender selves, no matter at what age. Interventions include social transition from one gender to another and/or evolving gender nonconforming expressions and presentations, as well as later gender-affirming medical interventions such as puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgery. To facilitate this process, the therapist assesses a child's gender status using assessment instruments, observation, play, interviewing dialogue, or projective measures. Diane Arensaf sums up the gender-affirmative approach in the following manner. When it comes to knowing a child's gender, it is not for us to tell, but for the children to say. So the affirmative model, as we know, takes at face value a child or teen's declaration about feelings and thoughts related to gender. It encourages parents, schools, and other authorities in a child's life to accept these claims. Though this approach has gained widespread acceptance, it has significant shortcomings. It may foreclose thinking about a young person's development by conflating gender dysphoria with trans identification, and it may concretize an adolescent's desire to transition without extended exploration and assessment. Because the basic premise of the model is that gender is something for the child to say, unconscious relational, systemic, archetypal, and social factors are denied relevance and exploration. The gender affirmative model of care may leave psychological factors unaddressed because one of its basic tenets is that the role of the therapist is to affirm, or maybe we should say confirm, what the patient knows. Okay, reality. The gender affirmative model of care rests on a false premise and encourages the patient to make critical health decisions based on a belief that contradicts material reality. This model presumes the existence of a gender identity and privileges it over a child's embodied reality. To me, this is the whole thing. And it was actually Stephanie who pointed this out to me, and I thought, yes. You know, if we believe that there is such a thing as an innate gender identity, then the rights model and early transition makes sense. But there's no evidence that this is true, and it contradicts material reality. So then what are we doing? Okay, I'm going to jump a little bit here. Because it is based purely on subjective criteria, the assertion that one has an internal sense of gender identity amounts to an unfalsifiable statement of belief. Without a basis in biological reality, gender identity takes on the significance of an essence, something akin to a soul, which of course can be a metaphor. When gender identity is taken as empirical fact, the metaphor becomes concretized. We lose the ability to relate to our inner world in a symbolic way and therefore impose interventions on the physical body. When metaphors are made literal, then the literal body becomes the vehicle for metaphoric expression. Confirming a young person's false belief puts her at odds with her body, her biological reality, and places her at an adaptive disadvantage. Jung stressed that adequate adaptation requires that an individual is able to grow in the soil in which it is planted before further psychological growth can proceed. Adaptation requires confrontation and acceptance of the realities in which we find ourselves. We do not help our clients by encouraging them to cling to illusions. Livia, a 23-year-old detransition woman who had a mastectomy and hysterectomy when she was 20 and 21 respectively, spoke at the Detransition Advocacy Network event in Manchester, UK in 2019, and she emphasized the role of reality in her transition and detransition. So now I'm quoting Livia. It's really hard to focus on one thing, but the word that's stuck in my mind the most is reality. I feel like for me, transition was a way to get out of my reality as a homosexual woman. When we started this conversation, the word that was important to me was reality, and reality to me is that a hysterectomy and removal of your ovaries doesn't make you any less female. So it doesn't make any sense to me why this is called transition or a sex change, because it's not. It's castration. And now that I am trying to care for my health as much as possible, I spend a lot of time on hysterectomy support sites and message boards for women. Because only women get hysterectomies, and only women deal with the consequences of a hysterectomy. So affirmative care for teens may reify defenses against reality, that's Alessandro Lemma's term, life's task, as well as the task of therapy, is to come to terms with that which cannot be changed and to mourn this so that we can move forward. The reality of our bodies insists on being confronted and accepted in adolescence, and this task can be particularly challenging for female adolescents. Social and medical transition undertaken without adequate understanding may facilitate a bypassing of a mourning process about that which cannot be changed. That's another quote from Alessandro Lemma. Coming to terms with bodily reality is a major task in adolescence. Jung understood the great importance of coming to terms with reality and the realities of our body as regards individuation. So this is Jung, and it's just such a great quote. If you were a spirit, you could be anywhere, but the damnable fact is that you are rooted just here, and you cannot jump out of your skin. You have definite necessities. You cannot get away from the fact of your sex, for instance, or of the color of your eyes, or the health or sickness of your body, your physical endurance. Those are definite facts which make you an individual, a self that is just yourself and nobody else. If you were a spirit, you could exchange your form every minute for another one, but being in the body, you are caught. Therefore, the body is such an awkward thing. It is a definite nuisance. All people who claim to be spiritual try to get away from the fact of the body. They want to destroy it in order to become something imaginary, but they will never be that because the body denies them. The body says otherwise. They think they can live without sex or feeding, without the ordinary human conditions, and it is a mistake, a lie, and the body denies their convictions. Okay, I'm gonna again jump forward a little bit because I can see that I'm out of time. So I have one more. I think I was robbed a little bit of time, but it's okay. Okay, this is the end. If we think of a belief in gender identity as a kind of neurotic fantasy, we might also imagine a hidden treasure within it, something potentially curative and redemptive. And of course, this is what Jung thought about neurosis. What is this symptom trying to cure or compensate in the collective? The affirmative model of care concretizes psychic pain, locates it in the body, and seeks biomedical treatment for it. Paradoxically, it also offers a compensatory belief in a disembodied, ineffable essence. In a BBC documentary, transgender psychotherapist Herschel Russell relates a story of a mom who asked her 8-year-old gender-diverse child how he knew he was really a boy. It must have been a girl, and he was saying he was a boy. And according to Russell, the child responded, "I know way down deep where the music plays." With the continued decline of traditional religious beliefs, are we unconsciously seeking a new way to conceptualize spirit? And does gender offer a mysterious, disembodied imperative offer this? The mythos that informs affirmative care allows us to see ourselves as beings with an existence that transcends our mere corporeal form. Jung famously remarked that the gods have become diseases. Gender identity ideology may be an unconscious attempt to find the divine hidden within the disease. We are perhaps being asked to find anew a connection with that which is non-rational and transcends materiality. If this is the corrective offered by gender identity ideology, we would do well to allow ourselves to be informed by this impulse while also maintaining contact with reality. Thank you.